In midweek, Fulham got back to winning ways with a 2-1 win over Wolverhampton Wanderers. In this video, I'll be going through how Fulham picked up their first victory at Molineux for over 40 years. In terms of personnel, there were 5 changes made to the lineup, with one of them being forced. Emil Smith-Rowe not in the squad whatsoever, and as expected, Andreas Pereira took his place. The other 4 changes that were made were definitely understandable given the quick turnaround in fixtures. And also you've got to bear in mind a very crucial fixture coming up on the weekend with our 5th round match of the FA Cup against Manchester United. Ryan Sessegnon came in for his first Premier League start of the season, coming in for Anthony Robinson, who had started every single Premier League game for Fulham this season up until Tuesday. Jorge Cuenca, Issa Diop and Rodrigo Muniz also came into the starting 11 over Raul Jimenez, Calvin Bassey and Alex Iwobi. In terms of system, it was a change to a back 3 with Andreas Pereira playing on the left and Adama on the right in that first half. In the second half, they did switch around so that Adama would be on the left and Andreas Pereira would be on the right. But especially in that first half with Andreas Pereira on the left, he would sort of drift into the centre, which would allow space for Ryan Sessegnon to come into the left wing, which is definitely what we saw for the first goal. And then out of possession, it was a 5-4-1, sort of what you expect when a team is in a 3-4-3 in possession. We'll talk about why a back 5 certainly did well in this match later on. Ryan Sessegnon opened the scoring within 58 seconds of the match, and there was a lot to like about this goal, starting off with Joachim Andersen's pass to Rodrigo Muniz. The Brazilian did very well to hold off the 2 Wolves players who were around him, and then to find Andreas Pereira, who was in acres of space. And in my Crystal Palace debrief, I said this. Now, don't get me wrong, presses like this can actually favour us at times because it creates space in behind for our other attackers. And that's certainly what happened here. It did help that Nelson Semedo hesitated a little bit, which meant Andreas Pereira was always going to get to the ball first. But he plays a very nice through ball on the stretch, very nicely weighted for Ryan Sessegnon. And then from there, it was just vintage Ryan Sessegnon, a nice low finish across his body into the bottom corner, something that we saw many a times back in 2018. And speaking on Ryan Sessegnon, 72 minutes played, 1 goal, 100% pass accuracy and 1 big chance created. It was a very good performance by him against Wolves, and I couldn't be happier for him. His spell at Spurs was heavily riddled with injury, and it certainly affected him even when he came back to Fulham. There were many times earlier on in the season where he was struggling to make the matchday squad because of his struggle with fitness, having not played football for so long. And even when he has been match fit, he's been struggling to get into the starting 11, mainly down to the high performance of Anthony Robinson, who has been one of, if not the best player for us this season. Barring cup games where he started all of them as a left back and even put in 2 man of the match performances against Preston North End and Watford, he's mainly been utilised as an impact sub on the wing in the Premier League. Whether that be as a defensive winger to protect a lead as seen as Chelsea away, or because of the lack of personnel on the wings as seen as Tottenham away. Something that helped Sess a lot in that match was the system that we used, which was a back 5, which when it was announced 75 minutes before kickoff, it's not something that I expected, but it's also not surprising given the fact that we have played that system a couple times this season, and it's clearly something that's been worked on ever since Gonçalo Santos has joined the club as assistant manager. That was the formation that he would use during his spell as manager of Casa Pia in Portugal. The system worked well in a couple ways, and let's just talk about how deep Fulham were. We were practically on the edge of our 18-yard area, which in the first half, I think myself and a couple of Fulham fans were thinking we're way too deep here, but it actually did us wonders, because if you look on paper, Timothy Castagne, Issa Diop, Joachim Andersen, Jorge Cuenca and Ryan Sessegnon, there is a real lack of pace there, especially on that left-hand side with Cuenca and Sessegnon having a lack of minutes, meaning their match sharpness is going to be nowhere near as high as we would want it. And with us being that deep, it stops any chances of Wolves being able to run in behind. And as said before on Ryan Sessegnon, we know he's not as good defensively, but we know his strengths in attack, which this system allows him to go forward in attack rather than having to be more reserved in case of a counter-attack. What also helped was how deep the midfield was as well, because it meant there was little space in between the lines, and when the ball did get through there was little to no time for a Wolves player to actually do anything with it. Players like Matheus Cunha had to drop deep and wide in order to receive the ball with some amount of space, which is where you really want Cunha to be from a defensive point of view. And that's how you get these match stats. 18 shots for Wolves compared to our 11, but our XG is higher than theirs because they had to resort to a lot of their shots being outside the box. And also we had 4 big chances to their none, which shows that if there was going to be a 4th goal in the game, it would have been more likely to us rather than Wolves, even though if you look on SofaScore with the momentum graph, Wolves would have looked like they were dominating much more, which simply wasn't the case. And I think a word has to be given to Joachim Andersen and Timothy Castagne, 2 players who have really struggled in form as of late, but they did very well here. I think Castagne's performance was summed up by his block from Ait Nouri at the end, and then Joachim Andersen did very well, especially in that second half when he went man-to-man with Strand Larsen. And that's another reason as to why a back 5 was a good call from Marco Silva. It gave Joachim Andersen and Timothy Castagne a lot more confidence in defence, and it's not like the pair of them are unfamiliar with this tactic, with Joachim Andersen playing as that central centre-back for Crystal Palace, and then Timothy Castagne playing a back 5 a lot of the time at Atalanta. Speaking about our second goal of the night then, it was a real slow start to the second half, only 63 seconds this time before we retook the lead at Molineux, and it was a great goal from start to finish. Jorge Cuenca plays the ball to Ryan Sessegnon and Adama Traore moves into the space. The Wolves defender who was marking him can't track him because of the real threat of the give and go that we spoke about earlier. Nelson Semedo's body positioning would have made it really easy for Ryan Sessegnon to breeze past him. So now Adama Traore has acres of space, meaning he has time to drive at the defence or play a pass, which is what he does, and what a pass it was. But the real fine detail in this move is the peel away from Rodrigo Muniz. If he just turns and makes that run, I think that pass gets intercepted, but because he peels away at first, the Wolves defender has to follow that movement and then make the run as well, which opens up that little gap that Adama Traore is able to play the pass through. And then from there, it was a brilliant dink from Rodrigo Muniz, albeit with some dodgy goalkeeping from Jose Sarr. Now, I've been very critical of Rodrigo Muniz, not because of his technical ability. I think all Fulham fans would have known the finishing was there, even from the Championship days when he was playing back up to Alexander Mitrovic, which was shown by his minutes per goal. But more for his footballing brain. There's been a lot of games where a lot of good crosses have been put in the box, but he's just nowhere to be seen. Now, I know this may be because he's been involved in the build-up with his hold-up play, which is why he may not be in the box, but there's definitely been times where he has been in the box and just hasn't made a movement. There's also been times where it just seems like he's jumping for the sake of jumping rather than trying to get the ball. But this season, he's definitely improved in that sense. A lot of Fulham fans, myself included, think that next season could be the season where he becomes our proper striker who we can rely upon, because this season he has been inconsistent, especially at the start, which is why Raul Jimenez has been starting the majority of matches. And I think his development is down to a couple things. One, his happiness at the club. We've seen on social media his videos with Andres Pereira and Carlos Vinicius, but also from a footballing point of view, his relationship with Marco Silva and Raul Jimenez. Marco Silva brought him to the club in 2021, and by this point, Rodrigo Muniz wasn't even starting for Flamengo. But there's no doubt in Marco Silva's ability in making players much better. Even Tim Ream developed a lot at the big old age of 34. I think Raul Jimenez is the perfect player as competition for Rodrigo Muniz. He's an experienced head in the Premier League, which is important because we mustn't forget it's only Muniz's second full Premier League campaign. So to have that experience, to be able to learn off Jimenez, that's a key part of his development. And I think what also helps is the level that Raul Jimenez is at. He's not someone who's a bang-on starter in the team. Of course, he started the majority of games due to his performance, but he's not the number one name on the team sheet, which certainly helps Rodrigo Muniz in the sense that he knows that a place is available, which will push his development even more. What also helps is that I'd say from a Rodrigo Muniz point of view, I think Fulham is the perfect club for him at this moment in time. A stable Premier League club and a team that has the potential to kick on, like an AFC Bournemouth, like a Nottingham Forest, which is why Fulham should be tying this guy down to a new contract. His contract is up next summer, albeit with an option to extend by a further year, but also as a personal reward for Molineux, who reportedly is only on 7.5k per week. One downside from the match was the 10th yellow card of the season for Sasha Lukic, which means he misses the next 2 Premier League games. It was quite a needless foul to make as well. It was probably a yellow card because of how late it was, but there was no need for him to make that challenge. 2 key games as well, with it being Brighton and Hove Albion and Spurs. I'd imagine that Andres Pereira would move down as the 8 and Smith Rowe would come back as the 10, with Berge and Pereira playing as a pivot. This is off the basis of the start of the season where Sander Berge hadn't joined the club yet, and so Lukic and Pereira played as a pivot. This obviously came with some problems as we were being overrun heavily, especially in that Ipswich Town game in midfield. Maybe we'll play a back 5 in those games. I'm not too sure. We'll have to wait and see. In terms of the race for Europe, we move up to 9th above Aston Villa, who we also have a game in hand of. We're only 2 points off Newcastle United, and that Brighton and Hove Albion game that we have next in the Premier League is looking really, really crucial. In terms of what's going to happen against Manchester United, I reckon we move back to the back 4, even though Marco Silva doesn't really rotate after a good win and a good performance. I think the only real 2 players that will have a chance of starting that game that didn't start against Crystal Palace will be Rodrigo Muniz and Andres Pereira. I do think Pereira will start and Smith Rowe will be on the bench, given the fact that Smith Rowe wasn't in the squad and Pereira had a good performance against Wolves, ran his socks off the entire match. And then Rodrigo Muniz, who actually won man of the match. But that's all you need to know about Wolves 1, Fulham 2. Please like the video, please subscribe and follow me on all my socials. That would be greatly appreciated. And thanks for watching.